be very happy to turn this program over to Jim Smith and Jeanine Grammick. Jim is a program manager with Dignity USA, working with us out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And he will be leading tonight's discussion with Jeanine Grammick, a sister of Loretto, who recently celebrated her Jubilee as a woman religious, and who's one of the pioneers in ministry with the lesbian and gay Catholic community and our family. So, uh, Jim and Jeanine, thank you very much for what I'm sure is going to be a great evening.
Thank you, Marianne. And it's great to be here with y'all, and hopefully Jeanine will come on here. As Marianne mentioned, I live and work from Minneapolis, so I see one attendee from Minneapolis here. Welcome to you, Judith. Hey, Jeanine, there you are. Welcome.
Hi. I'm
All
here.
right.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
It really is an honor for me to be in this conversation with you. I was a seminarian and a young priest, watching you warm up in your ministry
Oh,
in New Ways ministry with Father Nugent from my closeted pulpit, and it was you were just a great strength and a hope for me, who was coming to terms with my own sexuality and identity. And it was just great knowing that there were people out there fighting for LGBT individuals in the church and beyond. So it really is an honor to be with you today. Um,
well, that
I
I was going to say it makes me feel so good to hear that our work, uh, helped people way back in those
indeed,
early years.
indeed, yeah. I want to start back in those early years when you first sort of caught the fire. And it's been mentioned, you've mentioned it verbally and in writing as well, that a turning point for you was when you met a gay man. And I want to ask if getting to know this person and the effect that it had on you, was that a surprise to you? Was that a surprise that to you that this sort of seed was being planted in you, or did you see it coming?
Oh, it was a total surprise. Before I met Dominic, this young man's name was Dominic. I was at the University of Pennsylvania. This is back in 1971, and I had really no idea. There was no discussion in the Catholic community about homosexuality. This was
Hmm.
a new topic to me. And I met this young man, and we became friends, and I met his friends, and it just opened up a whole new
Mm.
world to
And
me.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
So go ahead. Oh, well, the uh, what I remember from that year 1971 was total surprise and really gift. And I guess my views on about homosexuality, which is we called it people homosexuals in those days. My knowledge was just what society
Hmm.
had to say, all the stereotypes. So I had these stereotypes, and I guess the biggest stereotype I think I had was that I felt that gay people were somehow um, not as psychologically balanced, or whole individuals. And when I started to meet gay and lesbian individuals, I realized uh, that was totally wrong. I never really, maybe I never really thought about the institutional church's uh, position about sexual ethics and the immorality of homosexual activity. But when I began to think about that, it seemed very unfair that we would put different expectations on gay people, different from heterosexual people. So that was never a problem, but I think that what I came or what I overcame was the cultural perception that gay people are, not as psychologically balanced, and that myth was destroyed pretty
That was in
early
the
on, I
that
would
was in the
say.
70s, was it not?
So,
When the medical association came out with that,
not
and
yes,
did you embrace that
yes.
sort of right away?
Well, yes. I mean, I came to meet and become
Yeah.
friends with gay people back in 1971, and the judgment from the psychiatric and psychological professions was the formal judgment was in
Uh-huh.
1973. So I had a little head start
Yeah.
because of my
And
my friends,
this
my
first
gay
fellow
friends
that you
at the
met, and then he
university.
introduced you to his friends.
Hmm.
Are you two still in friendship? Do you still correspond?
Right. Well, we remained friends after I left Philadelphia and I went down to
Mm-hmm.
Baltimore to teach at the College of Notre Dame of Maryland. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
he died of AIDS in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But we were close until that time. Another
Mm-hmm.
interesting story in my life was that when I met Dominic, I thought I have never met any gay people, and so this was like a new world for me. But when Father Nugent and I first began our pastoral work, and I remember the first retreat we gave for lesbian women, and I think that was probably in the late 70s, maybe early 80s. I'm not sure the exact year. But on this retreat, um, there was a woman that I had gone to high school with and grade school. In fact, we were not just uh, associates. We were really close friends. We used to socialize together. And I had lost touch with her. Of course, I went into the convent. She, meanwhile, went on to medical school. And she told me on that retreat that um, she came to realize that she was lesbian in medical school when she fell in love with a woman. And we used to go to high school dances together. And I remember her saying at the end of the evening, oh, she had a great time. She was dancing with all of these wonderful guys. And she said, and I had a wonderful time. And I really liked them all, but I liked them the way I liked my brother. And she could never figure out, she could never, she
Mm-hmm.
didn't
Mm-hmm.
understand when she was in high school what that meant. She told me until she went
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
graduate
Mm-hmm.
school and to medical school and she fell
So
in love with a woman.
these
So
personal
yeah,
relationships were were
so
were what transformed you. I mean, knowing
well,
these people and knowing their stories transformed you. And it strikes me
yeah,
that's, I
absolutely.
think, why the tide is turning in our society so much these days is because more and more people are in relationship with folks who are out, LGBTQ, and so relationship is powerful, is it not, in forming our own consciences.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. To me, that is the most important thing. The most important reason for all of the change that we see is that people are coming out and people are realizing
Hmm.
that
So
LGBT is
you and
not
Father
just
Nugent started this ministry,
everybody.
this pastoral ministry, New Ways Ministry, and obviously you were rubbing the wrong way with the powers that be, and it was when in
Right.
the late '90s that you were told to cease and desist the ministry altogether. Is that accurate? Okay,
That's accurate,
okay.
but there were many rumblings all along the way. um, uh, I mean, the first Vatican intervention, if
That
you will,
soon.
came in
Okay.
79, 1979, and that when the Vatican, yeah. Um, well, Father Nugent and I had co-authored a book that
Those
Dignity published, a
radical
little
dignity
booklet called
people.
"Homosexual Catholics: A Primer for Discussion," and
Uh
that
huh.
made its way. Yes, that made its way to the Vatican, and on another occasion, we gave a retreat um, for lesbian sisters, and the Vatican didn't like that either. Um, But at any rate, in the late 70s and early 80s, on three different occasions, the Vatican contacted our religious community leaders, our superior generals in Rome, and asked them to evaluate us and our ministry. And of course, the implication always is when the Vatican asks questions of a community leader like that, the implication is that they
Yeah.
would like it
Yes.
stopped, but they would like the religious community to stop it. So, so my religious community engaged, you might say, in three investigations. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't call them
Mm-hmm.
investigations, but I was dialoguing with my religious leaders, and on those three occasions, they answered the Vatican that this was a wonderful ministry. It was what the church should be
Mm-hmm.
doing, and in fact, more religious priests and religious should be in this ministry. Well, obviously, that wasn't the answer they wanted. So finally, they appointed their own commission in I don't know 85, 80, 86, I think it was. But it didn't get off the ground until the 90s. Oh, there's a lot of history about the Vatican Commission, but it was finally in '99 that the
And
Congregation
it
for
so it was
Christ
no real big surprise to
determined
you.
I should no
You
longer be
were,
involved in this
would you
ministry.
say you were fairly prepared for this final word? And
No.
did you know then when it finally came down the pipe? Did you know that you were going to
Right.
resist it,
Hmm.
or was that a process once word finally got to you?
Well, I would say I was fairly confident that
Yeah.
of the direction I felt God was calling me, or God was leading me in, and that direction was to continue
Yeah. Yeah.
to
So you were
work
determined
for
to
those who have no voice in the
to
church.
remain in this ministry
Yes.
somehow, some way. Um, was there fear? I mean, were you afraid of the
Hmm.
repercussions? Was there any sort of little voice of doubt in you, or was your conviction so strong that you knew of no other way to travel?
Hmm. Well, I like to think of myself as being fearless. However, however, having gone through
Mm,
certain experiences and looking
mm,
back, I realized I was afraid. I didn't think I was afraid at the time, but um, but as I grew because of these experiences, I each time I think I gained a little more sense of freedom. And as we grow in
mm.
freedom, I think we recognize the fear that we had that kept us back. So so yes, there were um, the the one time I remember, perhaps it was my provincial who instilled a little fear, but
Hmm.
she was afraid that I was going to be excommunicated. Now I never thought that was a possibility, but when she raised it,
Indeed,
then that
indeed. That's a
seemed a
that's a big
little,
word,
well,
excommunication.
a little fearful. Um, but yeah, but I later learned, as many people know, I had this surprise meeting with Cardinal Ratzinger when he was Cardinal Ratzinger
You were
on an
seated next
airplane,
to
and
him on the
I
airplane.
learned
You were
through
seated
the
next to him?
conversation with him
Oh, okay.
that you can't be excommunicated. Well, I wasn't seated. There were two empty seats next to him, so I just sat down right next to him, and that wasn't my assigned seat. but I had a conversation with him, and then he had a conversation also with my provincial, because we were on this plane from Rome to Munich, and he
Right.
was going to Munich for vacation. It was like the end of
Hmm.
July. The Vatican closes up in the month of August. Everybody at the Vatican goes on vacation in August. Too hot in Rome. So he was going back to his hometown in Munich,
Hmm.
and my provincial and I. were going to our big mother house, the main foundation in Munich, and the provincial was the person who said that she was very afraid I was going to be excommunicated. So she said, we need to make a
Hmm.
pilgrimage to this mother house, the School Sisters of Notre Dame Mother House, and pray that I won't get excommunicated. So we were on the plane from Rome to Munich, and in her conversation with him, she said, you know, we're afraid that Sister Jeanine is going to be excommunicated, and he said, oh, no, no. He said it is not that level of doctrine.
Mm.
So
We'll see
homosexuality
how that goes.
is not, I guess, excommunicatable matter. You know, it's not that level of doctrine. But I always say, well,
Yeah.
if excommunication means something to you, I mean, look at Father Roy Bourgeois. Okay, he they say he was
Hmm.
excommunicated, but to me, excommunication. Well, if you take the word apart, you know,
Hmm.
outside of the community, no one can excommunicate. You accept the community.
Hmm.
So if the Vatican
Yeah.
or any
It
official
seems to
says you're
me
excommunicated, if the
yeah,
people
it seems to me
don't
that that action
follow
has lost
that
its bite
injunction, you're
with
still in the
adult
public
Catholics these
canon.
days, which is a good thing. You, you have been
Right.
given your
That's
persistence,
right.
to carry on
That's
this
right.
ministry,
That's
and
right.
even when Father Nugent, in good conscience, chose to sort of disappear into other ministry, you chose to continue the ministry in new ways. And again, heroic to a lot of us who are looking from a short and long distance.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to ask you, Jeanine, who have been some of your heroes? Who have inspired you to choose courage over your fear, and conviction over compromise, to this
Um,
point?
well, some of my
Mm.
heroes are. I look to our Latin American martyrs. You know, the four women who were martyred in El Salvador. I mean, I'm, you know, what I'm doing. I'm not losing my life. I mean, I'm still living, but their work for the people, they had to they surrendered their lives.
Hmm.
So you know what I'm doing is small in in comparison. So they have been great witnesses for me. And Oscar Romero is
Hmm.
another hero for me
Hmm.
because you know he Archbishop Romero was known as a traditionalist or a conservative, but then he started to listen to the people, to his priests who were working with the poor in El Salvador, listen to the stories of the
Hmm.
campesinos, and his heart was turned around, and that's a great witness for me because you know I I think I have the right answer, and I don't want to change, and I
Hmm.
hold on to my beliefs, but there's something that speaks to me, that Oscar Romero speaks to me, that says
Hmm.
we have to
Hmm.
hold on, yes,
And
to
what
what we believe,
about
but be
folks who
willing
are
to listen and to
still
change
breathing?
if necessary.
Do
So
any folks
he's a
come to
great
mind
hero
who
for me.
inspire you?
Oh, yeah. Well, Teresa Kane, it comes to mind right away. Sister Teresa Kane, who in 1979, when Pope John Paul II came to the United States, his first visit to the United States, in Washington, D.C., he spoke to the women religious. And Teresa Kane at that time was the president of the Leadership Conference of Women Religious, the ones that are in trouble now. At any rate, in her address to him at the shrine, she, in 1979, spoke to him
Mm.
publicly about opening all ministries to women in the church, so including ordination for women. So she was a woman of courage. She still is a woman of courage. She still speaks her mind. So, today when I know journalists, want
Hmm. Hmm.
an opinion from a woman religious,
Hmm.
and
She,
many of us are might be
they have
afraid to
footage
say
of
something.
her,
Ilsa isn't.
her
So
confronting the
she's very
Pope,
inspiring.
and also
She's a
some
woman
footage
of
of the
courage.
both of you,
Hmm.
in a documentary called Band of Sisters, which, when it is available to
Hmm.
larger audiences, it just came out and it's been filmed it's been shown selectively, but it's a wonderful
Yes.
documentary on sort of the life and the charism and the mission of so many women religious in our country since Vatican II. It's called Band of Sisters, and Jeanine shows up in that. So I just want to give a heads up to our attendees. Janine, you know, you're still at it, and there is this childlike energy that comes from you, and so
I'm
where's the
and
battle fatigue? How
I
have you sustained your energy and your focus in when it comes to LGBT dignity and rights in the church and otherwise? I mean,
oh.
how do you remain so buoyant?
Well, you may think I'm buoyant and you may think I have a lot of energy, but listen, I just celebrated my golden jubilee and I'm 70 years old and I know I don't have the energy I had when I was 30. But actually,
Hmm.
what gives me a lot of energy is to see that
Hmm.
people, uh, young people, are following and taking the lead. I think that's very energizing. Um, and it's probably just part of my nature. You use the word persistent, and I remember a prayer service that we had when I was still in the School Sisters of Notre Dame. I'm now a Sister of Loretto. But when we were part of the school, when I was part of the School Sisters of Notre Dame, and I was part of, I guess it was a provincial chapter, we called them in those days. And in the prayer service, each person would say something like what she saw in someone else. And what was named for me was persistence. And at first I was kind of a little miffed. I thought, oh,
Mm.
that doesn't sound so good.
Well, we're
But
glad it's
it's
there.
true. I and why I don't know. It's something that God put there. Um, but what?
Hmm.
But what gives me like a lot of
Hmm.
energy?
Hmm.
It's we talked about at the beginning of the program is relationships.
Hmm.
People
Hmm.
sustain. We sustain each other, and I mean,
Hmm.
in the final analysis, of course, it's God. But how does God come to us? God comes to us in many, many ways, and one big way is through people. And I remember in going through the terrible ordeal with the Vatican, which I didn't realize how depressed I was until a couple years later. I had been in a depression. But what sustained me was a school sister of Notre Dame that
Mm.
I lived with, my housemate,
Amen.
and
Yep. I want to
some
just
other friends who were
stop
there.
for a minute
So,
here and
so
address a problem that
God
some of
comes
our
to me
attendees may be
very
having,
strongly
where it
through the
sounds to you
presence of
like
His
there's
Son.
overlap
Hmm.
between Janine and me, and that may be due to your computer having maybe shut down temporarily and then trying to catch up. So what I would suggest to attendees who are having this issue is to actually log out of the program altogether and then go back to the invitation and log back in. You can do that. You can just put your browser on the close the window icon, and then log back on and see if that helps. Okay. There, Janine, we've got lots of questions, but I'm not done with you yet. Okay. And so we've still got a few minutes, but there are a lot of questions that attendees are eager to be asking. Um, you know,
Great.
you are a religious sister, so there's some accountability, obviously, to your community and to the church. There are priests and nuns. There are lay parish workers who are salaried staff in parishes and in dioceses, whose fire is burning as well, and their integrity, whether they be straight or LGBT, their integrity is being
Yeah.
really tested these days when it comes to this issue. What advice might you have for them?
Hmm. Well, the advice is, first of all, I cannot, no one can tell anyone else what he or she should do. Um, but we all have our ideal behavior. And of course, the ideal is that what we believe in our hearts to be right, what we believe in our conscience to be right, that we would have the ability uh, to live that. And that's not always easy, and in many cases, it may not even be possible. In my own case, I've been very fortunate because the immediate religious superiors that I have had over this whole, what is it, about 40 years of
Hmm.
or more of ministry, GLBT ministry, all of those religious leaders have supported have what I've done. They thought it was a wonderful thing. Now, if I were in a situation in which my ecclesiastical boss, so to speak,
Hmm.
did
Hmm.
not think it was a good thing, then what to do? I don't pretend to have an answer. I think that each person has to search in their hearts and see how far we can go. I have thought of people ask me, well, aren't you being disobedient? And we have Sandra Schneiders has helped us. She's a theologian and woman religious, has helped us to understand what obedience is all about. And all of us need to be obedient to the call of God, to the will of God, and we have to discern what that is. But sometimes, I think we can achieve change and follow our conscience by using what I call
Hmm.
creative
Hmm.
circumvention around certain laws, or you might
Hmm.
be in a situation where there's a little wiggle room and you can still do what you believe is right and should be done, but it
Hmm.
may give an appearance of compliance. You know,
Hmm.
I think
It
there are
does. It
many
takes
different
for
ways
folks who are
that we
sort of
can
caught in the middle. It can take some craftiness, some
just
creativity,
help our
and
church
a
to
little
grow, basically,
craftiness of
and
a
at the
fox
same time
to
do
move
what we
forward.
believe is right in our
Um,
hearts.
we're going to segue into some of these questions, given the fact that there's such an eagerness
Yes, that's right.
to sort of converse with you
Yeah, yeah,
directly through their
yeah.
questions from the attendees that we have, Jeanine. So, Logan, if you want to begin putting up those questions, please do so. So, John from Verona, New Jersey asks, my gay son tells me after reading a number of verses in the Bible that he is going to hell. How do I tell him he is not? So, this is obviously a parent of a gay child.
Hmm. Well, I would always, I mean, I guess I would say that God loves us so much that I cannot conceive that God would uh, think or that your son should be in hell. Um, I guess what is needed is uh, that somehow we need to uh, enable him, that son, to get an appreciation of who he is and how good he is and how God loves us just the way we are. I'm reading a wonderful book right now. It's called Jesus, an Historical Approximation by a Spanish theologian, Jose Pagola. And in that book, it, it sounds a little startling, but I never thought of it before. But this is Advent, and the big during Advent, one of the main personages is John the Baptist, and John the Baptist preached repentance, and then you will be saved. But this author shows us that Jesus came with a different message from John the Baptist. Jesus' message was that we are already saved. We're not going to hell. Jesus doesn't ask repentance first and then you will be saved. No, Jesus says the reign of God is here. The kingdom of God is within you. You are already saved. And of course, we all have things to repent
and to repeat that as many times as it takes. It's really interesting. It's helpful. Some of you are giving John some resources in addition to what Jeanine has been saying. There's some great scriptural resources that are out there, and so John, pay attention to that text chat box. And if there are other attendees, I know Daniel Helminiak has some books out there on homosexuality and the Bible. So feel free to text chat those for John's benefit. Thanks, John, for the question. Marianne from Des Moines. I'd like to know how hopeful Sister is with the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church in changing their hard line stance against gays. That was one of my questions that I didn't get to, so thank you, Marianne. So is there any hope in your mind, and we want an honest answer, Jeanine, that there might be a change of heart? And if so, where? In what way?
Well, I think I guess I think like the institutional church. By that I mean in centuries. So I think in centuries, in the long run, there will be a change on the part of the institutional church. I am not. I do not think that it may be in my lifetime. Of course, now I'm getting old, so maybe the younger people in the audience will see that change. But our hierarchy, the U.S. hierarchy, and the hierarchy around the world were much more progressive right after the Second Vatican Council. But since John Paul II, we've had very conservative bishops appointed. So much so now that it's dominated by those who are very much to the right. So, to me, the hope for the church is not the hierarchy. The hope for the church is the church, meaning the people of God. We have to begin to believe and live what the Vatican Council, the Second Vatican Council, told us. We are the church. And so the church is changing. Look at the polls about marriage equality. Catholics, the majority of Catholics in this country support marriage equality. So when you say, what does the church believe about marriage?
It was
gay marriage.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is for marriage equality. The hierarchy,
Well, I want to say
but the
your
truth.
work in Maryland with
And
Catholics
that
on
is
marriage
a
equality.
truth
You
that
ran
we
into a
need to
lot of
get
Catholics
into our bones.
in the
We
pews
really
who
need
were
to live
fired
that.
up, and that's
So,
energizing, isn't it? That's inspiring.
no, 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 go ahead. Uh, uh, yes, yes. Oh, it is. Yes. And we were very happy that we took out two ads in major newspapers,
Hmm.
signature ads, and uh,
Yes, yes.
so
I
that
found that here in Minnesota
other
in my work
Catholics
to
who did
defeat the
support
amendment
marriage equality,
that
but
Catholics
maybe
are
were
finding their
or
voice
thought they
around
were
this
alone,
around
or
this
maybe
issue.
afraid to
They're
say it,
really
would
finding their
see that
voice, and they're
there were
going,
Catholics
"What's
who
the bishop going to
publicly
do to
say,
me? You know what?
"I am for
I
marriage
can speak
equality."
up." So it's been great. Irma
Hmm.
from Glen Arm, Maryland.
Yes,
Don't know if you know Irma, Janine. Do you?
that's right.
Oh, you do. Okay. Do you see the possibility of real
That's right.
ministry to LGBT persons with Catholic parishes,
That's
considering the
right.
negative pressure coming from the
That's right.
Archbishop or hierarchs in general? So, do you see the possibility of real ministry to
Oh, I
LGBT
do know
persons?
Irma.
Okay.
Yes. I do. Yes, yes, I do. In fact, we have uh, in the Baltimore Archdiocese where Irma lives, there are priests, there are pastors who are supportive, and although they're afraid, but we need to work with them. And if we are in a parish where the pastor is not so supportive, then we still can find those the real church. I call the real church, the Catholics
Hmm.
who want to form a ministry, and maybe
Hmm.
if the pastor's not supported, maybe you can't
Hmm.
have a meeting in the church, but you meet elsewhere. We cannot allow those antediluvian, I call them, attitudes
Hmm.
to block us.
And there
So I
are,
do
just a
see
plug for the dignity
myself
communities,
ministering
there are
in
growing
in
number of
parishes
young
like that.
Catholics who still
In fact,
belong to
UA's
Catholic
ministry has
parishes,
on the website
Catholic parishes,
publishes a list
but then
of
they
different
join
parishes across the country and
they
lists
join their dignity
growing.
sisters and brothers
So,
in other authentic worship experiences, in social gatherings, in many other ways. So. It's been interesting to see
right.
young Catholics who are still connected in parishes joining dignity communities across the country.
Oh, I think so. And it's not a question of either or. I think it's a question of both and because
Yes.
I myself,
Janine, I'm gonna.
worship.
We're being
I
told
worship in a
that
small Christian
we're
community, a
lagging
faith
with
community,
each other, so we're
not in a
being
parish.
asked
And yet,
to stop
when I
broadcasting
join
and then
people
click start
and
broadcasting right
worship in a
away. So
parish,
it
so
will
it's
both, folks. We're
it's
just
not a
gonna
question of
both go
one or the
off
other.
very temporarily, and then come back on to see if that doesn't solve the problem. All right. I hope that helps. Let us know if that helps.
Well,
There was another question. There we go. Karin from Palm Coast, Florida asks, could you explain the Q in LGBTQ? I have always thought of queer as a derogatory word. We get that a lot since we have penned this show, Queer Catholic Faith. And um, Janine, what's your thought?
well, I may not be the best person to answer this question, but my thoughts on it would be similar to like the word lesbian. The word lesbian was decades and decades ago a derogatory term, but lesbians began to use the term in a positive way. And similarly, I would say queer um, was a derogatory term, and I think now it is being used to dignify the word. At
Hmm.
least that's my take on it.
Yep. And others might say that, Karin, that queer is an inclusive term. It allows for folks all along the sort of fluid spectrum of gender identity and sexual identity. As Delphin says, for many of us, queer is a way of being inclusive of LGBT people and allies, and not designating people by any identity. So that's another way that people look at it too. It's a good question, you know. Some of us just aren't used to this word, and we grew up with the word as a derogatory, with a derogatory meaning. So it takes some getting used to.
Right.
All right. Richard from Kettering, Ohio asks, Jeanine, you have not ever disclosed your sexual orientation. As you know, most of us do not care what it is, and we respect your right to keep that personal and private. How have you handled the pressure to disclose it, and are you still experiencing some pressure?
Well, I wouldn't say I've experienced pressure. I think people occasionally have asked. In my early days in the ministry, um, I did disclose my sexual orientation, so anybody who knew me way back when, in the early 70s, I guess knows. But when uh, Bob Nugent and I started New Ways Ministry, um, I guess we talked about it, and we felt that it would be more advantageous to focus on the ministry and not our personal lives, I guess. And then I go back and forth. To me, it doesn't matter. And I think it may be better, to like let sleeping dogs lie, because it's been so long that I haven't even talked about it. So it would be a big thing. I don't want to make a big thing of it. And another, maybe the strongest reason for me is that I don't think we should um, make orientation a reason for our, um, I don't know, liking or respecting someone. And so if people want to think I'm lesbian, I'm comfortable with that. If people want to think I'm bisexual, I'm comfortable with that. If they want to think I'm heterosexual, I'm comfortable with that. And I do think the people who are close to me probably, know, but it's not a big deal. And in my, what should I say, the future that I see that is ideal, it wouldn't matter. We speak of the Q for queer as either fluid or maybe not important. That it's not that big a deal. So I guess they're the reasons that
Good.
I just
Thank
don't
you
think
for
it's
your
a big
honesty with that.
question.
Delphine from Miami. What insights or mission would you like to give younger activists who seek to carry out the mission of new ways of dignity, of equally blessed as you have? What lessons have you learned that you can share, and what would you like to see happen next? That's a mouthful.
Mm, yeah. um, well, I think we may have touched on this already. What I would like to see happen next is for the church to become truly church, that we would take ownership of the church, and that we would dissipate the fear that exists. And just if we could encourage everyone to live what they believe is right in their heart and to speak that truth, because I think, you know, the Spirit of God lies in all of us, and the Spirit should not be squelched, and the church will grow, and just as we grow. Uh, but if if we don't listen to the voice of the church, which is all the people of God, we won't know where the Spirit is leading us. So, what I hope for the future, is that we will take
Mm.
ownership of who we are as church, and it really is a
Mhm.
hard
Mhm.
thing to do because
Mhm.
we always look to authorities to tell us what to do, or we look to authorities for confirmation, and we need to
Mhm. Mhm.
we need to have the
That is so
confidence of the
true.
Spirit
Thank you.
within us.
Yeah, as much as folks don't want to admit it, I think there still is that hold that somehow external authority is where it's at,
Yeah.
and it certainly isn't. Sandra from go ahead. Go ahead.
And but well, I was going to say that that doesn't mean that
Yeah.
we don't need authority or authority is bad. We do need authorities, um,
Right.
but
Amen.
authorities shouldn't
So
be the God
Sandra
of
from
lying.
Georgia. Sandra, what is the difference in being denied the Eucharist and being excommunicated?
Hmm. Well, if you are
Mhm.
excommunication would be broader than being denied the Eucharist. It would mean not only are you
Mhm.
denied the Eucharist, but
Mhm.
you are denied any of the
Right.
sacraments of the church. However, I want to say this about the sacramental life of the church. You know, we are sacraments to each other, and if we studied the history, church history, and the history of the development of the sacraments, you know, unfortunately, the negative side is many um, rules and regulations were developed to as a means of control or power. You know that someone can withhold the sacrament from you. Well, the best example I have of that is not true is you probably remember that whenever it was a few years ago, um, the and it happened in more than one place, but the bishop said that if you came to presented yourself for communion wearing a rainbow stole, for example, that the priest should deny you communion. Well, in some places that that happened. The priest did not give communion to anyone wearing a rainbow ribbon. But what happened also in many of those places is that someone came to communion, received um, the host, and went back and shared communion with those who were denied. So we give the sacraments to each other, and I think that's important
Brad from LA.
to realize.
Welcome, Brad. What was your very first activity in your ministry? How did you and Father Nugent get organized?
Well, the very first activity in the ministry came
Hmm.
before I knew Father Nugent, and it was with my friendship, as I said, with Dominic. And I met him at a home liturgy back in 1971. We were having home liturgies; they were encouraged after Vatican II, and it was actually a concelebrated liturgy with a Roman priest and a Episcopal priest. And after the liturgy, Dominic said that he had many gay friends who hadn't been to church for years, and they would love to be at a liturgy like this. And I said, well, let's have a liturgy at your house, another home liturgy for your gay friends. So that was the first activity, you might say, was a mass at Dominic's apartment for his gay friends, and it was a very moving and a memorable experience because, as I said, many of
Hmm.
all of the people who came
Hmm.
hadn't been to
Hmm.
church in some in decades.
George from Houston, any comment on the papal message claiming that gay marriage is an attack on peace and justice? This was the Pope's sort of pre-Christmas message, or his sort of sort of on the eve of Christmas. He just spoke those words.
Oh, it just is very distressing for me to hear the leader of our church twist the gospel message of peace and justice. The gospel meaning of peace and justice is for those who are marginalized, and I just am so. I just get angry, and I can't give a really a very a reasoned response, because it really is very.
I think you said it, Jeanine, that when we strive for peace and justice, we're paying special attention to those who are marginalized, and so his placing those. The gay marriage and peace and justice in the same sentence like that is really a distortion. I think you said it very well. A couple more minutes of discussion, and then we'll wrap it up and invite Marianne back to the screen. And I do hope that our lag and overlap has been corrected a bit, especially when we went off and came back on. We are sorry for that. It's sometimes beyond our control with this computer technology, folks. So thanks for hanging in there with us. Delphine again. How do we as Catholics take our affirmation to the next level to embrace bisexuality and transgender individuals?
Well, I think we take it to that level by having conversations and programs and bringing it to people's attention. I mean, how Father Nugent and I started in this ministry way back, in the 70s, is it was an educational ministry to raise awareness in the Catholic community about lesbian and gay people. Well, now we have to do the same thing about transgender and bisexuality. And and maybe I'm just saying that because I'm an educator at heart, but I think that's how we have seen, I think that's a reason that we have seen a lot of transformation in Catholic attitudes across this country, because of education. Part of that education, as we said earlier, was coming out. So we need bisexual and transgendered persons to come out to tell their stories. And I think we will see the same kinds of transformation in that regard as we've seen in the previous decades, about lesbian and gay people. So it's education, it's telling our stories, and seeing that God's people are diverse.
Amen.
And there is great unity.
Thank you so much. We'll invite Marianne back to the screen here. And again, I just want to say what an honor it has been to be in conversation with you. Thank you so much, Jeanine.
Yes, thanks to both of you for a very wide-ranging and conversation. Any of those points that you touched on could have been, a half-hour discussion in themselves. And thank you so much to all our participants who, through your chats and your questions, enlivened this discussion. It's just great to see the level of participation in these events. Engender. Again, I echo Jim's apology for the technical difficulties we ran into and the delays. this session, like all our QCF sessions, has been recorded. I hope that some of that will smooth out in the recording. We will send out the link to the session and urge you to go ahead and share that once it's available with friends and family members and others who were not able to make this session tonight. It would be great to get all of the wisdom that Jeanine imparted this evening out to an even broader audience. We will also be sending all of the participants a survey about this session and ask for your input about folks you'd like to hear from again. We take your input very seriously and encourage you to send that survey back so that we can continue to improve this offering. Finally, I would like to remind everybody that this program and all of the work that Dignity USA and New Ways Ministry does, the very vast majority of that work is funded by the private donations of our members and friends. So please, as you're considering your year-end charitable giving, remember the ministries and the advocacy work and the outreach that's going on through these organizations. Please visit one of our websites and make a gift or send in a check. We really appreciate the support that you offer. Again, Jeanine, I'd really like to thank you not only for being with us tonight, but for the work that you have been doing for close to 40 years now. It's really a privilege to work alongside you. Jim, thank you for a great discussion. To everyone who joined us tonight, thank you for your presence. Thank you for your ministry and your presence in the church.
Thank you.
And I wish you, on behalf of Dignity USA, a very, very blessed Christmas season. And we hope to see you again for QCF in 2013.
Good night, folks. Thank you
Good
so
night,
much.
everyone. Thank you for joining us.